So I've noticed over the last couple weeks that a certain conversation is really gaining momentum on wrestling social media.
And I was kind of done watching WWE.
Not everything has been just all fine and dandy, has
storytelling down, fan interest down.
And Larson and I did a video about this last week where we talked about things that like wrestling and WWE kind of needs to improve on, because it's been kind of mid lately. It's been kind of like fine enough, but like really not that compelling. Borderline boring. Not like overly bad, but also not like overly good. Just sort of in the middle where it's like, well, there are some things that are entertaining enough and there's other things that aren't. And this is dangerous territory for a wrestling content creator, because usually that means that people are going to start checking out. And that's always bad for content creators, because, you know, we rely on people giving a shit about something that's either really good or really bad. But the one thing that you can't do as a content creator is just sort of talk about boring wrestling, because then people tune out. But the craziest thing is, I noticed this video. I was dicking around with my new YouTube channel, which, by the way, I've got a new YouTube channel. I'll put a link somewhere. And I'm doing non-wrestling stuff over there, just sort of, you know, as a hobby channel, I guess. I don't know. I was sort of dicking around with that channel, and I had looked up a variety of like content over there that I'm kind of interested in, sort of ranging from wrestling stuff to movie stuff. And I came across this video right here, and it's from somebody named RGT85. RGT85, as I'm sure a lot of you know, because he's got his main channel has like over 500,000 subscribers. I didn't know who this person was beforehand, but YouTube is a giant sphere. It's a giant space. So like, I don't know a lot of very popular people over there. I'm assuming if I was still doing the video game stuff like I was 15 years ago, I'd probably know who this person was. In any event, on this person's secondary channel, they did a whole video, because they don't really usually talk about wrestling stuff. They did a whole video that says, "I'm done watching WWE." And it's got 54,000 views, which is, comparatively speaking to a lot of the other videos on that channel, like a lot. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And so I watched a little bit of that video. I don't know, 5-10 minutes or whatever it is. I don't even know how long it is. It's 14 minutes. I probably watched like 7 minutes, probably half of it. I got to the gist of it, and then I was like, okay, I understand what you're getting at here. And his complaints, the thing that's interesting to me about that particular video is that when the conversation kind of like leaves the wrestling sphere and enters into like a whole other like non-wrestling channel, that's when you know it's not just content creators trying to get clicks. I'll be honest with you guys. This is full transparency. I hate when stuff like this happens. Ideally, wrestling is the way it is around WrestleMania season, but specifically like WrestleMania 40 and what we just had 41. Okay, we just had 41. So WrestleMania 40 season, when The Rock showed up and it was really, really good and everything was really firing on all cylinders, and there was a lot of cool shit to talk about. Every single week there was new shit to talk about, and it was like, wow, money's really good now, because a lot of views equals more money. And so that's when it's best. Like second to that, I guess, is when it's really, really bad and it's been sustained bad for a long time. It sucks as a content creator to have to watch that stuff. But in terms of like interest, dumping on stuff usually does pretty good. The worst place to be is when the conversation shifts from like, hey, wow, this is really good, to, oh God, this is really bad. Because then you start getting accused of, oh man, you're just saying it's bad to get clicks. Or what's even worse than that, you used to be so positive and now you're so negative. And it's like, no, I'm just responding to the things that I see. And right now, I see a lot of people not happy with the product of the WWE. And I found an entire thread on the Twitter perpetuated, begun by All Days 77. This, I guess this is like a wrestling Twitter account of some sort. And yeah, I thought I would go through and try to figure out why wrestling, in this person's words, it's so boring these days. Not that I have an entire wrestling podcast where we break this shit down, but I'm kind of curious, like, what do other people say about this? This one right here is like 1,200 likes and almost 500,000 views. And I've already sort of thought about this a little bit. I'm going to punctuate this video in a little bit by letting you guys know why I think it might get better sooner than later. There's a quote tweet. I think it's like one of the top quote tweet here from Moon Blivian right here from 2 days ago. It says, in no particular order, long-term booking, feuds drag on, I guess meaning like there isn't long-term booking. Feuds drag on. All you need is a catchphrase now. Rarely any interesting characters. Feuds aren't fun and creative anymore. This is like the entire gamut here. Triple H cares more about moments in the actual story. Champions don't feel like champions anymore. So, and there's a lot of other, what do we got? Laundry. How do you pronounce his name? Laundry Carter says too many commercials, 5-match premium live events, long out-of-date storylines, too many long absences, part-timers, tag team division is useless. Cody Tiffany title reigns boring. Relying on returns, moments don't mean the product is good. Triple H dream selling the fans. I don't know what that means. But this one right here had like 4,500 likes. So let's go ahead and like talk about these, sort of break them down individually. Long-term booking. I don't know, like, I'm assuming this person means that like the long-term booking sucks or there is no long-term booking, because I feel like Triple H has kind of my own thoughts on this is Triple H has like two modes of booking, way too long and not nearly long enough. Sometimes he'll hotshot things like really, really quickly. And sometimes I'll give you one example of long-term booking that's absolutely infuriating. 2024, let me go to full screen. 2024 saw Drew McIntyre completely turn a corner into legitimate main event guy. Total main eventer, right? He had an epic feud with CM Punk, and he came into 2025 with a lot of momentum. And all that momentum has completely and totally fucking died. His character is completely nowhere right now. And in fact, we had a hot take last week at the Going in Raw stuff where somebody said, or it was 2 weeks ago, I think, where somebody said Drew McIntyre is basically Triple H's Dolph Ziggler. If you look at Dolph Ziggler's later part of his WWE run, what was he? He was a gatekeeper, which means whenever somebody would debut or there was a return or somebody needed to be elevated, Dolph would be the guy to show up and lose to that person. And so recently, fairly recently, at WrestlePalooza, Drew McIntyre had a WWE title shot against Cody Rhodes. Drew McIntyre does what Drew McIntyre, the character, always does. He loses, he takes his eye off the prize. He makes a mistake. He lets his emotions get the best of him. He loses focus, and then he loses. Now, there was a rumor, I don't know if this is true or not, but PW Insider, I think, said that Cody and Drew had pitched WWE on the idea of Drew winning the championship at WrestlePalooza, and that was turned down. And my only thought was, fucking why? Why did they not run with that? What happened to the idea that you can have a shock title change or a guy that's obviously worthy of that, Drew McIntyre, and it would do nothing but help his character? Why not do that? I don't you just re-signed the guy like what, a year or two ago, 18 months ago, something like that. And you're not rolling with him as a champion. Instead, Jacob Fatu, a guy who was super hot and then went super cold because he was gone and they didn't do anything with him, comes back, and who greets him? Drew McIntyre. And the fact that Fatu was gone for a long time makes me think that he's probably going to get the best of this particular feud with Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre will lose yet another feud. Unless that is, in advance of him winning the Royal Rumble or Elimination Chamber so that he can go on to win the WWE Championship, then I guess that, would make sense. But my God, for all the building up of Drew McIntyre that went down in 2024, they have pissed all that away. I don't believe for a second now that he's going to win jack shit. And that's an absolute shame. And that to me is just really shitty long-term character booking. Let's take a look at some of these other things here. Feuds drag on. That's kind of the same as long-term booking. All you need is a catchphrase now. This is kind of an interesting one because it was sort of thrown at Jey Uso for just being yeet. That didn't bother me as much because now they're actually doing something kind of on the down low interesting with Jey Uso, where he's like trying to be the new tribal chief, but like in his own way. And it's not like he's trying to, grow a faction or anything, but he's taking the words of Roman Reigns to heart. Don't care about anybody about yourself. Try to go after the championship. That's the only thing that matters. For a long time, people thought Jey Uso was merely the word yeet. And I understand that. But I also understand that Jey Uso as a character has come a long way. If you look at the entirety of his bloodline story, for 4 years, he was the most compelling thing on television. So that character kind of earned the right to just be yeet, because it was like it's him partying and having a good time and he's free of all that bullshit. And now he's sort of diving into that in his own bullshit way because he's in his own head. I kind of like that. I think that's pretty good stuff. But you look at, for example, the aforementioned Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu seems more interested in saying all of like the 4 catchphrases that he has and not a lot else. And I don't know why that is, because I've seen other promos of his like in MLW and whatnot. And it's like the guy can really talk. He can talk, but it's as if he's been told, hey, you know what really sells? You know what really pops? You could just do your catchphrase, because that's always going to pop a live crowd. Live crowd wants you to do your greatest hits. You go to a Pearl Jam concert. I go, if I could afford it, talk about price gouging. And I'd want to hear like, the first 3 albums of material. And after that, like I could care less, really. I don't want to hear anything that came out in 2025 or 2024 or 2023. I want to hear what shit came out in 1991, right? Wrestling's the same way. You're there in person. Oh, you're going to love the yeet stuff. You're going to love the Yaramin stuff. I want some substance when I'm sitting at home watching this shit on television. I need some substance, not just catchphrases. So this one is also something that I kind of agree with. Rarely any interesting characters. I think that largely has to do with them being boiled down to catchphrases. Feuds aren't fun and creative anymore. I agree. They follow templates, sort of like copy-paste templates. Triple H cares more about moments than an actual story. This one is so disappointing to me because I agree with it. Look at the John Cena Rock situation, Elimination Chamber. I know it's been talked about endlessly. That moment right there, there was no plan for a follow-up. Rock was not going to be around. Seemingly, they all knew that. I guess Travis Scott they were really relying on Travis Scott to carry the Rock's portion of that. They gave us the promise of John Cena and the Rock having segments and a character dynamic and maybe like a mini faction. And they absolutely gave us literally none of that. And then, and I know I've harped about this a lot, and I'll bring it up once, then I'll leave it alone. The face turn was maddeningly stupid. When John Cena just got in the ring with Cody Rhodes and said, you know what? I was a bad guy because people were telling me that it would be good for TV. I don't want to do that anymore. What? That's horrible. That's absolutely awful. That is trash. Yes, the Elimination Chamber moment was awesome. Everything after that, not so much. Cena does have some good matches since then under his belt. The Brock Lesnar one was not one of them, but I'm sure the AJ Styles one coming up this weekend is going to be pretty decent. All that being said, I will say this. My hope, and maybe it's a misplaced hope, is as much as he would loathe to admit this, I firmly believe that Triple H is very much online. And I think that he understands, because like, why wouldn't you? I think he understands a lot more than Vince McMahon ever did. That, yes, the online criticisms is stuff that you at least need to take to heart to a degree. You can look at other metrics, but those other metrics eventually are going to fall in line with that conversation. We've already seen ratings down a little bit. We've already seen the venues that were filling 14,000 a year ago or earlier this year are now filling like 10,000 this time around, like around this time of the year. So attendance is starting to drop off. Does that matter because, like, for their bottom line, because they're just able to charge more for tickets? Yeah, maybe that doesn't necessarily matter, but it's not a good sign if you're now bringing in, like, what, 80%, 75% of what you were bringing in before. I feel like he's probably going to be a bit more malleable. He's probably going to listen to that conversation, and even though he would never admit it, make some changes. Hopefully, he'll actually lock in and do that. I still maintain that the main issue is there's too much television. There's just too much. This is not the 1 hour NXT that he used to book, which eventually turned into a 2 hour NXT. It's not that. And for those of you who like NXT, I suspect that's probably why NXT, I guess, is run the way it's run, because Shawn Michaels only has to deal with like 2 hours of television every single week. Triple H has premium live events every 6 weeks now, plus obviously Raw and SmackDown. And he probably oversees to a degree NXT as well, in terms of like just making sure things line up with what he wants to do on main roster. So I feel like probably sooner than later, maybe by the time the Rumble comes around, which is still another fucking 4 months away, maybe by then we will see a return, or at least an effort to make these big moments pay off in terms of ongoing stories that keep us wanting to see what happens next. Because ultimately, that is the job of Triple H, to get us to tune into television, for us to then, by the end of it, think to ourselves, man, I can't wait to see what happens next. That's going to do it for the show. Thanks, everybody, tuning in. Appreciate it. Go ahead and hit the subscribe and the like button and all that kind of stuff. See you around.